So last time, I challenged myself to look at one of my favorite films growing up without the lens of nostalgia bias in an attempt to analyze it more critically. Today, I'm allowing myself to do the exact opposite and hype up a movie from my childhood, possibly beyond what is comfortable for an audience to watch. The movie I am talking about is Disney's Ice Princess. It's a 2006 follow your dreams sports movie about a girl named Casey Carlisle. She and her mom have been getting her ready for the big league of academics, and her teacher recognizes her talents and encourages her to take part in an independent study scholarship, the consequences of which sends her into the world of professional figure skating, and it's there that she realizes an internal passion and desire to see how far the sport can take her. The movie goes hard and hits me in all the right ways to unlock a massive flood of waterworks in a way that reminds me that my tear ducts do in fact work. That said, if I tear up during this review and that makes you uncomfortable, I'm not sorry. You can watch someone else's review. But seriously, please bear with me. When I watch these movies, I take time-coded notes in a document, which involves a lot of pausing. Even then, this movie still got me. And for the purposes of this video, I think that's a good thing. So the movie has a lot of dynamics going on. There's self-worth, projection, nuances of feminism, the relationship between the focal characters and their mothers, and honestly, the moms are focal characters in their own right. A lot of the plot is driven by their perception of the world around them and how that influences the way they treat their daughters. So yes, it's a sports movie, but it's also so much more than that, and I want to explore these themes, the relationships the characters have with one another, and a few key moments that resonate with me. So let's start with some of the smaller points and move on up to the bigger ones. One of my favorite things about this film is the usage of prop acting. You could say so much about a scene or a character without actually putting words to it, just by simply giving them something to do. Take this scene at the beginning. This teacher is making toast with a Bunsen burner, all while carrying a conversation. This conversation happens while this woman is preparing a salad right after our main character shows up unannounced. It really shows that these characters have lives and habits that exist outside the plot. Even this eating scene has so much gravity to it, even if it is accidental, due to the fact that actors really hate these scenes. In a way, the hesitancy to eat on camera adds gravity to the emotional landscape. Even giving your character something to do when they aren't the focal point gives you fun, new things to look at on repeat watches. Even if you aren't really a fan of prop acting or think it's a crutch for weaker actors to fall on, at least it provides them a means of staying in the scene without this stiff awkwardness of waiting for their turn to speak. Another thing I appreciate in this movie is the treatment of Anne, Casey's longtime friend. They take the same high school classes, they're both aware of each other's academic standings, and hold no ill will towards one another, even when the scholarship program comes into play. Now, this might be my limited viewing experience speaking, but what I typically see in movies where the main lead makes new friends and explores a new passion, any old friends get replaced or wind up missing. Maybe there's even a plot thread about how the old friend is jealous and they have a falling out. Maybe they even make up in the end. Or don't. Who knows? The important thing to note here is that while Anne doesn't keep plot relevance, she's sprinkled in throughout the film to let you know that she's still there, and she's supporting her friend Casey in her newfound passion. And it's actually kind of sweet. To top things off, she even gets integrated into Casey's new friend circle in a way that is both super wholesome and does something fairly unique. Anne's role is twofold. She's the starting point for one character and acts as an ending point for another, all while bonding the 2 points together for herself. Anne is an example of how your friends' friends can eventually become your own friends, so it's nice to see that a minor character gets this kind of payoff, and that's really beautiful in its own way. Speaking of friends, there's a dynamic about this movie that I find both endearing and amusing. So Casey's taking part in this scholarship program, but in order to observe the skaters, take notes, and even film their training sessions, she has to gain approval from the parents. Now, the scene with the parents is a little much.
Look, here's a letter from my teacher explaining the assignment. And my driver's license. I've also got some letters of references from people I babysat for.
I don't know what those parents are gonna do with her driver's license, but this girl came prepared. Can you imagine printing out several copies of a teacher's assignment to prove to a bunch of people you don't know that you are in fact a student and not a government spy? And no, I'm not making this up. Tina Harwood, the owner of the skating rink, goes into full-on attack mode on this poor girl for holding up a camera.
What do you think you're doing? Why are you filming my skaters? You're scoping her triple loop. Why? I'm gonna call the cops.
I can understand not wanting the competition to know your routine, but shouldn't skaters just be concerned with their own programs and prove that they can perform them with the technical skill required when presenting it to the judges? Sure, choreography is definitely a part of it, but she says the most bizarre thing in her defense.
Look, I'm sorry, but when the CIA wants to learn new dirty tricks, they observe figure skaters and their moms.
Those two specifically? The funniest part, though, is that despite being worried that someone is snooping on her daughter's routine, two of her daughter's competitors are right there on the rink, and they both have their own coaches. Aren't you worried about them, too? But I'm getting sidetracked. The real reason I went on that little rant is because of what I mentioned a moment ago. These girls know that at some point they will have to go out there and perform their routine and try to place higher than the other. Yet they don't act hostile to one another. In fact, here they all are hanging out with each other, and they act as a support group. They hang out outside of practice, they walk together at school, and they vent to each other about practice.
I don't know what's wrong. I'm popping my Lutz. It's all that cheese. Would you shut up?
Okay, so maybe there's a little hostility, but I see it as friends poking at each other. At any rate, the focal tension in this movie is recognizing your own passions and separating them from what is expected of you. From the very beginning, in that toast scene, we have people telling Casey what she's destined for.
How do you know if you have a calling?
When your brilliant teacher tells you so.
For her whole life, her mom has been preparing her for Harvard, an incredibly difficult school to get into. Not only is it expensive, it requires a lot of academic success and promise that outshines everyone else. You have to be exceptional. And the thing is, Casey is exceptional. She's very good at school. She's been succeeding with her grades for her entire run. That is something that her mom, her peers, and her teachers recognize, and they all push this idea that this is what she's meant to do, and Casey believes they're right because she's never questioned it for herself. This is just what is expected of her, and she's good at it, so why not, right? The only stumbling block she has now is figuring out what passion can personalize this independent study program so she can stand out. On the opposite spectrum, we have Tina Harwood and her daughter Jen. That's Jen with a G, by the way. Having your mom as your coach means that you have to deal with typical parenting also being compromised by the expectations that an athletic trainer has for their competitor. She can never just go home and leave the skating at the rink. She has to follow a restricted diet. She has to go to bed early. She has limited social interactions. She has to get up early so she can train before and after school. Not only that, but she has to balance school with her athletics. She has to practice balance and self-control, all while also being a teenager, a time in your life when everything is just chaos. Sure, the structure gives her some semblance of order during this time in her life, but the lack of deviancy means that she gets burnt out by it all. It would make sense that at school, she's the most sociable person, and that's her only escape. It's the only time she has for friends, dating, and feeling free of being controlled. She gets to feel like a normal teenager. And then it's back to being a skater. To her, Casey has the good life, a mom who is just a mom. A life where you get to be a teenager, eat what you want, spend time with who you want, and not be defined by your performance. Except her initial framing is fairly naive because that's not the case. All her life, Casey has been the smart one. She also has a mom who has expectations of her. She has an equally restrictive diet that she only deviates from if she's at Anne's house.
I need to eat ice cream, and all your mother has to eat is leftover tofu. Can we go?
The only friend she really hangs out with is Anne. Most of the time is spent studying. Yes, she does have some time for herself, but Casey dons the yoke of her expectations voluntarily and doesn't bother exploring outside of that, save one exception. Call it fate, if you will, but a pair of ice skates found at a garage sale that fit her perfectly, and a pond outside her house that freezes over just right in the winter gives Casey a break from academic burnout. This is Casey's escape. So much so that she even watches Olympic skating on TV. And that's when it hits her. Skating is something she's passionate about. Now, her mom isn't a big fan of ice skating. Not the sport necessarily, but how women are dressed when they compete. We'll circle back to this, but for now, we run under the assumption that Casey has cleared this project with her mom because it's a side interest that Casey's mom is well aware of that also covers the requirements of the scholarship program. After all, she has seen her skate before, and it makes sense that it furthers her studies. What she's not counting on is Casey's desire to learn how to apply her findings to herself. Next, we enter the journey. What I love about Casey's journey is it feels earned. Granted, there's some creative licensing taking place for the sake of the plot, like the lessons recital doubling as a test for ranking skaters. Kirsten Olsen, a professional skater who played as the character of Nikki Fletcher, said that actual tests are solo, in well-lit rooms, and they are so silent that it is incredibly nerve-wracking. In addition, there's no jumps in ranking. Casey can't simply get a junior pass and be placed in the same rank as skaters who have been skating for years. That said, I don't think editorializing for the sake of this movie cheapens Casey's emotional journey or the emotional landscape of the film. And honestly, it wouldn't work otherwise. It also serves as being something fun to watch, and we still get this fun moment where Casey experiences stage fright for the first time, which provides a starting point in her relationship with Tina Harwood and officially puts her on Jen's radar. When all is said and done, Casey gets her first real taste of success and feeling good about herself and wants to pursue the sport. And in true Disney fashion, her coach tells her that if she just believes hard enough, anything can happen.
If I wanted to compete.
You can't.
What?
You got some raw talent. But that's not enough for a shot at the regionals. Where'd you get those skates? They're falling off your feet. You need custom boots, $600 minimum, and the blades need to be sharpened every 6 weeks.
$600? And it doesn't stop there.
You need a coach, ballet, choreographer, private ice time. Nikki's parents took out a second mortgage just to put her through this. And Tiffany's dad works 2 jobs. It's not something you do on a whim.
Perhaps more responsibly than expected, Tina pulls no punches on the cost attached to the sport. It's not very typical that a Disney film reminds you of how expensive and extensive a sport or hobby can be. But Tina lays it on thick, and her tone basically says, and that's just the entry cost. Wait till you actually start training. Speaking of, the minimum wage at the time of this movie was $5.15. That means it would have taken Casey an entire month of working full-time in order to come up with the $800 that she needed to even afford her course for beginners. And it wouldn't even begin to cover these new additional costs. Now, I know they solved the financial issue with her independent studies thoroughness being good enough to sell, but again, we've established Casey's scholastic success through her life, and while I don't know the actual process it takes to sell your work, though I'm sure it probably takes time and peer reviewing, I can suspend my disbelief that it could be accomplished before the school year gets too far along. That all being said, I still don't think it takes away from what Casey is actively earning. She's balancing schoolwork, ballet, still working at the concession stand, biking, exercising, practicing at the rink, so on and so on. And you can tell by the montage and subsequent scenes that it is slowly but surely wearing her down. So yeah, I don't think anyone watching this thought, I want to be a skater when I grow up, very lightly. At least, not without having a parent in the room giving them a wake-up call. I am not taking out a second mortgage for you. You could forget it. So, while the financial barrier to entry is quickly removed, there's a lot of established information that earns it. And it's not like she isn't also dedicating scads of time applying herself. After all, the money doesn't make the jumps. You do. Which leads me to this wonderful montage of Casey understanding the power of lifting others up. Casey wants to compete, but you bet she's so grateful to have the ability and financial backing to have rink time that she's willing to help out her new skater friends perform at their best. And it's this encouragement that she gives Jen that really begins to solidify the start of their friendship. Jen already had the athleticism and the muscle coordination. She just needed someone to help her make some micro adjustments to get it down. And that's the wonderful thing about this scene. Casey wants Jen to know that this is earned. Sure, the science is there, but knowing the science isn't enough. You still have to be able to apply it.
It worked.
Just like you said it would.
The computer doesn't make the jumps. That was all you.
And you know, a little help one way yields some help back in return. Going back to what I said about all these skaters being competitors while also being friends, it's so nice to see this moment here where Nikki is actually teaching Casey some choreography so that she can have a skate program for the upcoming competition. I suppose it's more fun to compete against someone if you know that they're at their best. It makes the victory that much better. Or at least that's my take. But it would seem that Tina Harwood doesn't think that. She is so freaked out about her daughter potentially losing to her friend that she actually goes out of her way to buy her competitor a brand new pair of skates. A, need I remind you, $600 sabotage to keep Casey's performance stiff and very painful. We get these shots that switch between Casey skating and her watching, and her face is unreadable, and we don't know what's going on in her head, adding to the drama, the mind games, if you will. This seems suspicious, the timing seems weird, but there's nothing wrong about getting a brand new pair of skates, right? On a first-time viewing, not knowing about the breaking in process for skates, this scene is a mental minefield. What is going on? And then the boot comes off, and that's when you realize. And that's when Casey realizes too. That relationship she had built up with Tina just instantly shatters. The supportive teacher is now a criminal in her eyes, and there's only one thing left in her broken heart to do. This is it. I live for this scene. The intensity of the opening shot is so powerful. The way she gets out and shepherds her daughter immediately after really sells how much like a mom she is. Every time I watch it, I can't wait to see Mama Bear just rip someone to shreds with words. I think this scene really solidifies a couple things for me. Joan may not necessarily approve or even like the whole skating thing, but she will defend her daughter's honor and be there for her when she needs her. And this confrontation is so amazing. You see the sparks fly and the way these women keep coming at each other in their own way, with Tina walking away only to turn right back around and assert her stance to Joan, who's simply standing her ground and securing her stance early on with the moral high ground. She challenges Tina and repels her at every turn. Compare this showdown to the one from earlier where the two of them are sizing each other up. Joan out of pettiness and Tina out of instinctual defensiveness. Tina has worked hard to get where she is today, and she will not stand to let anyone put her down. Now, Joan holds the high ground, and while Tina doesn't come out of this looking well off, she makes her stance pretty clear and doesn't back down from it, leaving the mom showdown something of a draw, but the moral victory always goes to Joan. And while this standoff does result in a tie, it's a setup for Tina's loss later on, when she has to confront her daughter over the same situation. Speaking of which, let's talk about Jen. Something I really appreciate is how this movie doesn't go out of its way to vilify the popular crowd. Yes, there's that scene where Casey's very bad ability to navigate social interactions gets a rather cliquish response from some girls at a party, and the jock guy is a bit flaky. But this movie doesn't really pit the geeks and the populars against one another in the usual typical fashion. Heck, even at the beginning, Anne playfully muses that with enough time, the sporty guy she fawns over will find value in her brains, and it's nice to see boy talk that's more lighthearted in nature and isn't played as a joke. Circling back to Jen, her intro is given the typical glam shots, all given to the cool, popular girl. Since this story is about Casey, it would be normal to expect Jen to be a catty, teenage mean girl, but as we discussed earlier, there's more to her than meets the eye. You see, Casey understands the importance of building others up, and that's something that Jen has taken to heart. It doesn't take long after that moment for Jen's initial apprehension to melt away, and she swiftly turns into one of Casey's most supportive friends. She's the first person to ask Casey about her mom. We get this fun little moment where she uses Nikki to teach Casey not to fall for head games, and even though her mom is all about going into the bubble, she is seen watching Casey skate every time. She genuinely wants Casey to succeed even though she's a competitor, and it's so wonderful to see her build Casey up every chance she gets.
She figured that out on her computer.
Mom, the computer doesn't make the jumps for you.
Fifth, that's great! Yeah, but fifth doesn't go to sectionals.
Listen, you skate a clean program tonight, you can move up. Knock me out of fourth.
I love how this girl wastes no time to stand by Casey's side and be there when she needs support. Zoe Block tries to get into her head, Jen just swoops right in and decimates her trickery. Her fierce friendship and loyalty is refreshing and beautiful to see. Sure, she's dating Brian, but I think it's safe to say that Casey is the first friend she truly loves. She cares for her well-being and happiness, and it really hurts her when she thinks she's lost Casey's friendship due to her mom's cutthroat tactics. and it culminates in this wonderful moment where Jen just explodes on her mom and lets her have it.
Do you know what I want? No, you don't know what I want. Because you never cared.
I can see that maybe we've overdone it.
Overdone it? Just a little. Casey skates, Mom.
I can't not love this scene. This is the natural conclusion to the mom showdown, and the placement of these two conflicts are paced very well. I just love how Jen is so mad at her mom, she knowingly skips out on practice. Tina comes in to be the coach mom she always has been, and we get this shot where for the first time ever, Jen doesn't care what the onlooking students think about her. She wants to express how she feels. Contrast this to a throwaway line from her first interaction with Casey at the skating rink, and this shows a fundamental change in Jen's character. Also, this guy's antagonizing face as he laughs at Tina when she scares this group of students off is good extra acting. Another thing I love about Jen is just how much she's affected by Casey, because it's more than just skipping practice. She's so repulsed by what happened, she dropped out of the competition completely. And the best part is that this scene runs full circle on the subject of projection. Casey is so dejected. She falls back in line with what's expected of her and painfully accepts what had originally been planned. And then we get this very honest question.
Tomorrow's my Harvard interview. That's my slot. That's what I should be doing.
You sure about that?
For once, someone is asking Casey what she wants. This friendship she has with Jen feels so intimate and special, and thinking about the bond these two share in more ways than one is something I wish I saw more of. And the fact that Jen goes on to befriend Anne during the ending sequence is wonderful because it really cements how much Jen has opened up to giving people a chance. And I honestly see her, Casey, and Anne being close later on in life too. And I think it's time we talk about Tina now. She's divorced, she's raising 2 kids, and she was a skater who got suspended for so long that by the time she was reinstated, she was considered too old to continue competing. As a mom, she's doing her best to provide for her family, and as a coach, she pushes her daughter to be strong and to succeed. Where the cracks really show goes back to projection. Tina missed her shot, and she has placed all this pressure on her daughter to carry the torch in her stead. The family trauma storyline is starting to trend more these days with movies like Encanto and Turning Red, which doesn't feature villains in the traditional sense, but obstacles, communication issues, and generational guilt. I think this is a healthy trend in storytelling, going back to roots like these, where the focus of the story is people and how they relate to others. Tina is messy. Even though she clearly did wrong and should feel guilty for what she's done to Casey, she is resolute in her principles and doesn't offer an apology. It's interesting to see her own up to who she is unapologetically. It shows a history that we never truly saw on camera. She doesn't make excuses for herself. If someone calls her a monster, she owns the label and calls it survival. It's very clear that she has had to act tough and make difficult decisions and own every consequence. She doesn't have time for defense. She is who she is, and if you find a problem with that, she isn't interested because that's not her problem to deal with. We don't get flawed characters like this very often, at least not in Disney films. And that's when this emotional punch comes soaring in. This scene I showed earlier was Casey's Lions song, and it's actually a reshoot. Michelle wanted it in the movie so badly because she felt it was important and something she wanted young girls to see. And honestly, I'm with her on this one. Casey has sacrificed so much, and she can't ignore her passion anymore. She knows what she wants to do, and not only is she ready to fight for it, she's willing to accept the consequences that come with failing. But she will be hard-pressed not to at least fail on her own merits instead of letting a barrier of entry prevent her from even trying. And that's respectable. And we see Tina break out of her hard shell for a moment when she accepts Casey's gambit. Yet it's not the first time we see this desire to be a vulnerable person. It's there. It's just a small glimmer you get every now and then. Despite her harsh nature, Tina is very tuned to Casey's emotional needs. She supplies emotional support in her own world-weary way, like the gift of her old outfit, a relic from her bitter past. Harsh characters that show affection are like a diamond in the rough. When done well, they add a unique texture to the overall emotional landscape of a scene. And that's because their generosity and kindness is only apparent in hindsight. Foundationally speaking, Tina's kindness is subtle and hidden by the fact that 95% of the time she pushes. And you see this with the way Jen and Casey are able to recite Tina's coaching advice right back at her before she even says it. Yet when it really counts, Tina knows how to bring out the schmaltz. And listen, I know, the believe in yourself and follow your heart moments are all cliche, but the fact that this moment right here comes from Tina, out of all the other characters, makes it far more impactful and meaningful than if it had come from anyone else.
One more thing.
What?
Skate with your heart.
It's like that meme. I hate character tropes. Proceeds to blubber about a well-executed character trope. Well, now you're probably wondering, if that's where the follow your heart moment comes from, where's Casey's mom in all this? Joan's a university professor who teaches feminist literature. She's a self-professed feminist, and a lot of dialogue seems to suggest that the topic of feminism comes up time and time again, to the annoyance of her daughter. She even has this teacher mode that she has to remember to turn off when she's at home. Take this conversation, for example.
And to think they pay them almost nothing. I mean, the devaluation of teachers in our society.
Mom.
I'm back. Sorry.
I have to figure out what he wants from me.
The whole secret of the study of nature lies in learning how to use one's eyes. You know who said that?
I'm guessing it was a woman.
Casey is trying so hard to keep the topic focused on her independent study, but you can see from this example, it's so easy to get derailed, something that Joan becomes fairly self-aware of. It's fun details like that really make the character who she is, but it also adds an interesting conversation to the movie itself. A fun exercise for whenever you watch the movie, count the number of times Joan realizes she is treading out a boundary, reestablishing a boundary, or confirms with her daughter that she's not crossing one intentionally. Also, this moment.
I'm sorry. That was so type A of me. Mom disease.
You can really sense that Joan is trying her best to treat her daughter like an equal, while still trying to balance being a parent. She reins herself in and checks with her daughter for approval she hasn't gone too far. Yet we know from the very first scene that she schedules out Casey's study times, at least to some degree. She wants to make sure that Casey devotes some time to her academics, and Casey lets her do this. Going back to the theme of projection, we see Joan do some speaking on her daughter's behalf. This moment I just shown was right when Casey was about to confess that she's taking a skating course and got totally interrupted.
I've been so worried. I mean, you've been living at that rink, but you're here now, and you're excited.
Then there's this bit right here, which feels exactly like a typical mom moment of projection, like predicting your friends.
Do you know what I think is great? If everything works out with Casey's scholarship, I'm sensing that you two will be spending scads of time together.
And now I know why that phrase is embedded in my vocabulary. Well, at the very least, now we have some foundation for Joan's point of view. She's been dreaming of sending Casey off to Harvard since she was little. She didn't get the education she wanted in the time frame she would have liked, and raising a child on your own isn't easy. In her eyes, this is a stepping stone to Casey's future. But Casey's desire to also figure skate is disrupting that.
What is the shelf life on a ice skater? 8 years? And then a few years touring with has-beens on ice. And that's it? That's the end of your life?
I love it, Mom.
Case, there's no shelf life on your mind.
Now, this subject of age is touched on twice in this movie, and it's only fair to point out as a legitimate concern for Casey's future. Again, this movie does its dues in having reality come punching down to remind the viewers that your passions can't just be whimsy. You really have to want it, and you have to be okay with the consequences of the pursuit. However, this subtle nod to reality that I see in movies really begs the question of ageism in sports and how we all seem to just accept that that's the way it is. And what's considered old for a man and what is old for a woman might also vastly differ in the world of sports. I won't go too far in on this tangent, but I think that's something our society really needs to start addressing. We acknowledge that it's a facet in the world of sports, but we aren't having a hard conversation about why that is. But what this movie does address, or at least tackles to a good degree, is the conversation of feminism as it pertains to beauty. It's not just enough that ice skating doesn't seem very practical. Joan views it as setting women back.
I just can't get past the twinky little outfits. Sets us back 50 years.
And Joan's philosophy feels passive. Remember Casey's outfit from the campus tour? I'm going to use this as an example of why I feel this way.
I think the whole effect is very grown up with a nod to femininity. We've evolved past flaunting it, but we don't have to deny it. And I really wanted the look to say, we are serious.
I think that Joan's core belief is that in order for women to be treated as equal or be taken seriously, they have to abandon anything that we typically define as superficial. On the one hand, makeup and fashion magazines in those times and to this day are very predatory and harmful to a young woman's self-esteem. Yet, there isn't anything inherently wrong with liking makeup or fashion, and this is a fundamental value where she and Casey clash on.
Are you sure it doesn't just make you feel beautiful?
So what if it does? What is so horrible about that? About feeling strong and graceful and beautiful for once in my life?
Joan's journey in this movie is one of recognizing and re-examining your personal biases. Just look at that pause. And her face reads like she's recognizing the compromise to her worldview caused by her personal prejudice. And up to this point, and even after, Joan goes through a whirlwind of moments of emotion and human weakness.
No, it'll always be the Casey and Mom show.
Do I?
That's a lot to take in. Her entire worldview is called into question. Her personal biases are getting in the way. And as a parent, it's insane for your child to say no to one of the nation's best colleges. She's not being unreasonable, but even she has areas where she needs growth, and that's important to see in a movie. Because watching her inner conflict is just as gratifying a journey to watch as any other in this film. Casey's mom is understandably heartbroken and still dealing with some cognitive dissonance, and Casey has this hole in her heart. And now, we're at sectionals. Realism check number 2. The movie takes some liberties for the sake of adding stakes and painting a dramatic atmosphere, such as the mood lighting and ESPN doing live coverage. It's very easy to nitpick these things, but since the cinematic editorializing is being done for the sake of the emotional landscape, I think there should be an allowance for it. And there's a lot to love about the competition scenes themselves. The 4 major skaters all have their own specific styles, and their themes really suit them. They're entertaining to watch, and even though, again, they all have to be well lit in reality, the cinematic appeal of the spotlight skater really elevates the emotion. Here, I'm going to place an honorable mention to Giuliana Canarozzo for her portrayal of Zoe Block. Something I really appreciated was this inclusion of real skaters like her and Kirsten in the movie. While she has no real acting background or refined acting skill set, she does a great job for her role. Her skating is phenomenal and super stylish. I know we're not supposed to like her character, but I cannot help but adore her punk rock attitude and showmanship in these shots. How can you not want to cheer for that? Perhaps I have my own personal biases. I know I've been talking for a while and none of it has been about Teddy yet. While he has a serviceable role and there are things about his character I would like to talk about, this video is already long enough. What I will say is that Teddy's importance comes in this one line, the part where he forms Casey's narrative into one beautiful sentiment.
I can't have a 3-word conversation with anybody I haven't known since kindergarten. So how come I can do that in front of you?
Because you let people see you when you skate.
It's all coming together in a beautiful thematic ribbon. I think the hardest part about talking up this movie and all the things I love about it is how everything is so tightly woven together, it's hard to dissect something without unraveling my thoughts clear over somewhere else. So allow me to have one final point before I get to the good part. And trust me, it'll be worth it. The cinematic aspect. We've been hinting at it for a while now. Hollywood's creative license plays with the rules of reality a little so we can have this narrative, but since I've squared most of that away, there is one element of cinema that I haven't brought up until now: the music. The intro song is sentimental and sweet, and even if the context is toned to this movie, it sets up Casey's narrative rather nicely. Some of the other songs are fairly filler and very early 2000s, but there's this beautiful original score we hear throughout. If I were to describe how it sounds, it elicits thoughts of dancing raindrops. The pitter-patter of the sounds are like a sparkle or a shimmer, refractions of light, and then you get this gorgeous and graceful melody that comes in after it, almost like a skater on the ice. It's very fitting, and the timing of this melody to different scenes gives it a different emotion each and every time. From Casey's bike, where she starts her journey unassumingly, to when she sneaks off to her first skating competition. And then it plays again when she's trying again and again with her old skates to practice on her own before Teddy comes to the rescue and convinces her that she'll need help to succeed. Speaking of skates, those play an important role as well. Casey's new skates and the track we hear playing while she skates with them, Reaching for Heaven, creates this interesting contrast. And by using the instrumental version of the song first, it sows emotional seeds rather early on so that when we hear it again with lyrics, it has so much more power to it. And the use of this song to amplify pacing is executed beautifully. That's when we get to my favorite moment. In Casey's first run during the instrumental track, she falls right when the first chorus picks up. We see her face in pain as she slowly picks herself up. I can hear all the skaters screaming in the room, and Tina's face is just unreadable. By contrast, in this run, Casey's first fall is just after the chorus begins. Ironically, as the lyrics talk about rising like a phoenix, but this time, Tina's doing a slow breath, almost like she's reminding Casey to stay calm. I know technically that's not possible, but it's the framing that tells the story. Something cinema doesn't flat out explain is a time dilation phenomenon that is often taken advantage of, where a cut to a different shot of the same action will actually go back a little in time to reinform the shot. By a similar vein, our brain recontextualizes all these different reaction shots to be happening simultaneously. So even though you must be screaming at her to get up, the people in charge of controlling the flow of time have done their job very well, because this slowing down of time adds so much intensity. It gets people holding their breath while also giving us a little breathing room to digest the moment properly. And that's why I love movies so much. They use timing to let you feel things. Just right before the second verse starts to end, the words are, "I know you'll catch me if ever I fall." And at that moment, Casey feels like she's seeing things, and she stops for a moment, and there she is. Her mom fighting back tears from within the crowd. Casey smiles, and then as the chorus plays for the second time, more fiercely than the first, she just starts moving. It's like she's saying, "Look, Mom, this is who I am." And she starts showing off. It gets me every single time. I cannot help but cry, but also laugh at this little moment where it looks like she's about to do a cartwheel on the ice. What makes this moment better is all the dialogue running parallel to the song. There's so many layers of sound and action happening at once. It feels so full of energy and excitement. She threw the routine out the window and improvised a jump just from her mom. And yes, it's on the Phoenix lyric. There's so much contrast happening in this one scene. And then the bridge. The bridge comes in and the music and rhythm change the pacing and agitate the motion. There's so much anticipation for a finale, and it's the perfect moment to show Jen and her mom rebuilding their relationship. And the banter between the two commentators gives us the perfect spacing to lead right back into the ending of the song and Casey's final spin. I love this scene so much. There's so much power in this final moment as all the threads come together to be tied up with the cinematic bow that completes this emotional landscape. The moms come to an understanding of their daughters. The bond that was broken is on the mend and their relationship is stronger for it. And Casey gets this beautiful moment where she goes back to the ice and relives the moment from before. What can I say? I'm a sucker for it. It doesn't hurt that I also think the skating is beautiful, and I'm certain this isn't even a great demonstration of superior technical skill, so the professionals are only going to further wow me. That said, you can have all the technical prowess in the world, and it'll still fall flat without heart. So maybe Tina's mushy moment isn't unwarranted. Can't have a movie without soul. Right, Disney? I know this movie is a cinematic construction. There's a lot you can nitpick on a technical level, but when I think about how it makes me feel and the thoughts it provokes, I can't help but love it. has a very clear message. Sometimes what you want is hard, but nothing is worse than failing because you never got to try. And I think that the ideas of feminism are the same as the lesson of the entire movie. It's about choice. You can't expect to plan someone's entire life for them because as they grow and learn who they are, their choices tend to deviate from that plan. There's nothing wrong with preparedness, but there should always be room for growth and adaptation. And I think the two families in this movie being a stark contrast to each other by being similar in different ways really illustrates the message of freedom, of expression, of choice, and how projection becomes a limitation rather than a vehicle for growth. It doesn't hurt that they also come to a realistic compromise as well. Similarly, the question of feminism, as it pertains to beauty, is answered as such. Beauty for oneself, when it answers to no one else, is worthy of expression for no reason other than its own sake. And so long as that's the interpretation, it cannot possibly set women back, so long as women hold the power of that expression. And that's my interpretation, and I hope it made sense. Well, that wraps up this glowing review of one of my favorite movies. I know I was talking for quite a while, maybe even for as long as it would take to watch the movie. So, if you made it this far, thank you very much for watching. I genuinely appreciate you listening to me ramble about my love for this movie. Hopefully you have fond memories as well. If you do, let me know about them below. I would love to read through them. With all that said, I'll see you next time. So, until then, stay tuned.